All right, let's just jump right in, because today we are embarking on a completely unique kind of journey. Usually in these explainers, we're parsing through absolute mountains of data, right? We're sifting our way through dense, multi-page research papers, or trying to untangle these incredibly complex webs of global news. But today we're doing something totally different. We are pulling out a microscope. We're going to look at an artifact, and not a physical object, not some piece of clay or weathered stone dug out of the ground, but a purely textual artifact. We've got this solitary, isolated fragment of source material that was handed to us, sitting entirely on its own, completely divorced from any larger body of text. And as someone who absolutely loves to break down information, I gotta tell you, there is something deeply, inherently fascinating about being presented with almost nothing at all and having to look closely, like really, really closely, at what is actually there. We're going to unpack this tiny, highly concentrated capsule of language. We're going to examine the very structure of these words. So get comfortable, settle in, and let's begin our deliberate, forensic analysis of this mysterious little fragment.
So here it is. This is the raw English text exactly as it appears in our source. Take a second and just absorb it. The Code of Ur-Nammu. It's incredibly stark, isn't it? When you isolate text like this, when you just strip away all the noise, all the supporting paragraphs, all that historical context that usually holds our hand and tells us exactly what to think, the words themselves start to take on this massive, almost physical weight. Now, what's truly interesting here isn't just what the text literally says, but how it feels to read it in a total vacuum. It sounds ancient, it sounds deeply authoritative, and honestly, it sounds entirely uncompromising. We're basically dropped right into the middle of a concept without a safety net. But as we're going to see, the context of how this specific text arrived to us is just as compelling as the phrase itself. I mean, think about it. That is the absolute entirety of the English content we have to work with today. Just 5 English words. In our modern world, we consume tens of thousands of words a day, right? We scroll past essays, we skim articles, we let these massive walls of text just wash over us on our feeds from the second we wake up to the minute we go to sleep. So when an artifact arrives that is stripped down to merely 5 words, it forces us to just slam on the brakes. It demands our absolute undivided attention. Why these 5 words? Why have they survived or been presented in such total isolation? The extreme brevity of this text is absolutely its defining characteristic. It isolates you as the viewer, putting you face to face with this profoundly quiet piece of evidence, forcing you to sit in the stillness of a really, really minimal linguistic footprint.
But of course, it didn't just magically drop out of the sky. This is the original Arabic source container from which our 5-word excerpt was pulled. This is the title of the document, the label on the folder, so to speak, where our English phrase was found living. And seeing this instantly sparks a whole wave of curiosity, doesn't it? It provides a much-needed anchor. Suddenly we have a layer of metadata, we have a container, we have a broader linguistic environment that houses our tiny English artifact. It tells us that this fragment was cataloged, kept, or presented by an Arabic-speaking source. It completely reframes the English words, giving them a home, a context, and a journey that brought them to this exact presentation.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates the visual and linguistic dichotomy we're dealing with today. We have this striking visual contrast between the two elements. On one side, we have the Arabic source title, characterized by its flowing, connected script, a language system built on elegant, sweeping roots and cursive connectivity. And then on the other, we have the English fragment it holds, the Code of Ur-Nammu, built of blocky, distinct, completely disconnected Latin characters. It's literally 2 entirely different linguistic worlds, 2 completely different aesthetic traditions, brought together in one singular piece of source material. It kind of makes you wonder about the life cycle of this text, right? How did this specific English phrase, representing an ancient code, end up meticulously placed inside this specific Arabic container? Well, to truly understand that, we need to translate the container itself. The Arabic phrase literally translates into English as the pasted text or the affixed text. Think about the implications of that for a moment. Actually, really picture it. To paste something or to affix it implies a very specific, very deliberate action. It means taking a piece of material from one place, cutting it away, picking it up, and intentionally attaching it to another. It implies a collage, a fragment extracted from its original home and just stuck onto a new background. This definition casts our English phrase in a completely new light. The Code of Ur-Nammu isn't the whole document. It is literally the thing that has been affixed. It's a clipping, a label pasted onto a broader, maybe even entirely blank canvas by an unseen hand. Okay, so let's see how this concept builds our understanding, because now we need to pivot our focus entirely back to the primary English excerpt. We know it's a pasted fragment, we know it's incredibly isolated, so now we've got to perform a deep, granular dive into its linguistic weight. When you only have 5 words to analyze, Every single syllable matters. We can't rely on the next paragraph to explain the subject to us. We literally have to interrogate the subject itself. We have to squeeze every single drop of meaning, intention, and structure out of the phrase that someone deemed important enough to be the affixed text. Let's break this down into its absolute, bare-bones structural components. First, we have the definite article. Not a code, not some code, the code. It establishes this immediate, unquestionable uniqueness and undeniable importance. Then code, a powerful structural noun. Next, of, the preposition establishing belonging, origin, or possession. And finally, Ur-Nammu, the proper noun, the identity. Looking at it bulleted out like this really emphasizes its incredible structural simplicity. It builds anticipation. It's a perfect, self-contained grammatical unit, a subject and its origin. There is no verb here. There is no dynamic action taking place within the phrase. It is simply a profound statement of existence, standing entirely on its own.
So the absolutely crucial point is this word right here, code. By definition, a code is a system of rules or principles. It is the framework by which chaos is organized into order. A code implies structural authority. It implies consequences. It implies a society, a civilization that requires strict guidelines to function and thrive. When we read this word on our artifact, it gives the text immediate heavyweight. I mean, this isn't a fragment of a poem, right? It isn't an excerpt from someone's personal diary. It is a declaration of law. Even without seeing a single one of the actual rules, the mere presence of the word code tells us that we are looking at the title of something designed to govern human behavior. It is a monument of authority, distilled into 4 letters.
Which brings us to the possessive aspect of the phrase, of Ur-Nammu. This authoritative system of rules doesn't belong to a parliament, a modern democracy, or some vague collective of thinkers. It belongs entirely to a singular, specific entity. The name itself, Ur-Nammu, carries this phonetically ancient, resonant quality. Without bringing in outside historical textbooks, without relying on external research, just looking strictly at the text we've been provided, we can deduce something pretty huge. Whoever or whatever Ur-Nammu is, they possess immense power. To have an entire code named after you, to be the origin point of a system of societal rules, implies ultimate authority. The phrase creates a massive, imposing shadow, and it's cast entirely by this one defining name.
But as we transition to this next concept, we really have to acknowledge what is arguably the most fascinating part of this entire analysis, the silence of the artifact. Think about the unseen context. There are absolutely no body paragraphs provided in our source. There are no lists of laws. There are no penalties outlined for theft, no regulations for trade, no societal structures explained or defended. We're basically presented with this monumental heavy door, but the entire building behind it is totally missing. The silence is deafening. It's a fantastic exercise in what historians and textual analysts call negative space, understanding an artifact not just by scrutinizing what's there, but by acknowledging the massive, gaping void of what has been left out.
Let's actually walk through the literal steps of our journey to really hammer home what we actually possess in this unique artifact. Step 1, we have an Arabic source title telling us this is an affixed text, a deliberately pasted fragment. Step 2, we have an English subject heading declaring the supreme, uncompromising authority of the Code of Ur-Nammu. Step 3, we have absolutely nothing else. That's it. That is the entire universe of our source material for this explainer. By laying it out in these clear, structured steps, it really emphasizes the profound silence of what isn't there. We're essentially holding a meticulous label that's been carefully peeled off a very important jar. But the jar itself and all of its contents are nowhere to be found.
Which naturally leads us to ask this absolutely crucial rhetorical question. What lies beyond the title? If this fragment was important enough to be singled out, pasted, and preserved as its own distinct artifact, what was it originally meant to introduce? This question transitions our entire narrative from the hard, undeniable facts of the words to the captivating mystery of human imagination. Because when you're presented with just a title, your brain desperately wants to fill in the blanks. What were the rules of Ur-Nammu? Were they just? Were they brutal? What kind of world did this code actually govern? The artifact doesn't tell us. It flat out refuses to answer. It only invites us to wonder.
Ultimately, we have to conclude by recognizing this artifact for exactly what it is, a solitary, powerful heading floating on a completely blank page. We've explored the literal meaning of its 5 words, the striking visual contrast of its Arabic container, and the heavy, undeniable authority of its phrasing. But the true power of the Code of Ur-Nammu, as it's presented here in this specific pasted text, is its mystery. It leaves us staring deeply into the invisible text beneath it. It reminds us that sometimes, in the vast ocean of human information we swim in every day, a single isolated fragment can be just as thought-provoking and just as demanding of our attention as an entire encyclopedia. So I'll leave you with this. When you are presented with just a tiny fragment of the truth, what missing context are you automatically filling in yourself? Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and above all, keep looking closely at the details.